It's exactly 4 minutes past the hour. That's of 8 a.m. And at this particular time, we're getting straight to the coffee court, and of course, quite a lot will be shared regarding that. And the coffee court this time around will emphasize on the aspect of global warming, and of course, trying to see what's the way forward. And of course, recently we see quite a lot of initiatives like the COP27 that just recently took place, and of course, as a way to cut down the climate change, the carbon emissions in the atmosphere, and of course these have been very, very, very relevant in terms of changing, as we see weather patterns are changing globally, worldwide. So we want to find out regarding that. And when we talk about this aspect, it's a personal responsibility as an individual right there, wherever you are in Uganda. It's not about the big, the policymakers that suppose that are responsible for this particular aspect, for this fall, for these changes. It all starts with you as an individual in that place where you are, in that village that you're located, to ensure that you be a part to avoid and reduce on the global warming, because the long-term effects are quite very intense, and majority might be left vulnerable if it's not really taken into much consideration. Coffee Court has more.
Well, it's a pleasure and thank you for joining us once again on the Coffee Court, where we daily discuss critical issues. And this time around, we center our discussion on matters of global warming, climate change. I am cognizant of the fact that there is a conference ongoing, which started on the 8th, and it will be climaxing on the 22nd. What does this mean on the economy of Uganda? Definitely joining me to discuss this is Henry Bazira. He's Executive Director of Water Governance Institute here in Uganda. Mr. Bazira, it's a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be on your TV station.
Okay. So we discussed a critical matter. First of all, what is global warming? As an executive director and as a senior who has followed up such matters.
Increasing temperatures from pre-industrial years, period, to something that is way out of normal. That's what is being referred to as increase in global temperatures. So global warming is essentially just an increase in global temperature. So the targets for countries is that they would like to bring the temperature to that point before the industrial era started. So, and they are saying that in order for us to do that, there are certain things that we must do as countries to ensure that we reduce the emissions. The maximum target that they have set is 2 degrees centigrade. But they are
when you
playing
say
around.
the maximum target they have set, which people have set the target you're talking about?
The members that attend the conference of parties, Uganda inclusive, all the 197 countries in the world are members of the United Nations. So together with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, who are usually the organizers of this international convention, which we are now talking about COP27 now, that's where we are. We have had COP26, COP25, COP21, which was in 2015, which was the beginning of setting what they call ambitious targets to make sure that the globe temperature is at least reduced to the temperatures as it was before the pre-industrial age. So now, you need to go back and look at the graphs and see what was it. Was it 25 degrees centigrade? Was it 22? Was it 18 degrees centigrade?
Before we get to the statistics of what it was and why are we where we are, why would this be a major discussion for a country like Uganda?
Global warming affects all of us. You know, we are like, here we are seated in a room, in an office, okay? So whatever happens in this room will definitely affect us. So let's envision a balloon. The world is a balloon.
Sure.
Let's envision it ourselves like
Okay.
the world is a balloon. and all of us are in that balloon. Okay? Outside the balloon, there is no temperature because there is no air, it's a vacuum. But that balloon, the air that is in that balloon is warming and cooling from inside that balloon. And all of us are in that environment of the balloon. So whatever happens inside the balloon will not only affect Uganda or America or Europe, but will affect everybody. Because when the temperature changes in that balloon, it is going to be overall wholesome in the balloon. So globally, the globe as a balloon, once it warms up inside, the warming up will affect every region of the globe internally. Because the Earth does not exchange air with the space.
What does it do?
All the air and whatever is locked up into this globe, and nothing goes out because of the ozone layer and all the other stratosphere, all the spaces that we have that prevent this air from escaping out. So you are cooking yourself from inside out. That's the problem with the global warming. And what is causing that is because of mainly carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide we are emitting inside this globe with the balloon is more than what the plants that we have around can absorb and convert into green vegetation, into food. Yes? So the excess carbon dioxide and the carbon monoxide are the ones that are responsible for heating up. You have heard the word greenhouse effect. Greenhouses are structures that are built with either a net or a plastic over them. So the air inside the greenhouse is always warmer than the air outside. Why? Because of during the daytime, the plants are using the carbon dioxide. During the night, the plants are emitting the carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide is used by the plants to do photosynthesis, produce food, produce carbohydrate, which we all need.
So bring us to speed. Good enough you brought an example of a balloon.
Yes.
Let's now bring this closer to issues of the economy.
Yes.
Where and how does this leave our economy?
Now, let me give you another example. In a greenhouse, warmth is good for the plants.
True.
They will grow very well, they will grow very green, so the plant and the carbon dioxide is good for the plants, only during the daytime. During the nighttime, they are also emitting CO2. But because of the machinery that we have made, the cars, the industrial machineries, and the oil that we are burning, coal, LPG, yeah, petroleums, oils, they are producing too much carbon dioxide that the environment that we have is not enough to consume, to remove the carbon dioxide, to balance the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Now, normally, the normal environment of carbon dioxide is supposed to be 0.0003% of what? Of the drop in terms of air composition. But now you are seeing the composition of carbon dioxide increasing to about 0.013 by 10 times, by another 10 units. That's very significant. So we don't want that situation of warming up to a point where we are not in position to produce food. The other thing about global warming is that it disrupts air currents. Like I told you, the balloon, the air is rotating inside the balloon, the globe. So when it is hot, air moves faster. You have a lot more hot air than cold air. Normally you have situations where in order for you to have rainfall, you normally have an influence of hot and cold air passing over each other and causing rainfall to fall, right? So you find a situation where all the air is hot. It can no longer hold water in the atmosphere. And therefore you can no longer have rainfall the way it used to happen. And therefore your rainfall seasons will definitely change. And that means your food production will automatically change. Because even today as we are, I'm not very sure that there is any farmer today who is now very certain when he should plant and when he should harvest. Because it rains in the wrong times as expected, And when he's going to harvest, that's when it is raining. He has harvested a bad crop and is being killed in the field by a rain when he wants the crop to be dry, the maize to be dry. So in terms of food alone, the climate is affecting the amount of food that is available for human consumption.
So it seems to be suggesting that we're living in the times of uncertainty.
For unpredictability of rainfall seasons is creating unpredictable food production. That's one point of economy. And that is significant because if people can't eat, you're not going to eat your shoe. Are you going to eat your shirt? Even if it is produced, you need food. Every human being needs food. Every human being must at least eat 1 meal a day. Okay? So when you are not able to feed your population, world population now is about 8 billion. If you're not in position, we are going 9 billion very soon. If you're not in position to feed the 8 billion people and they are starving, there will be crisis. That's number one. Number two, climate change affects normal operations of business because countries that were initially cool are now becoming very hot. You are introducing, it is bringing new diseases and pests. So the increase in medical bills to look after the population, yeah, also goes up. So the cost of living goes up.
Medical issues connected to this. The issues with health probably emanate from probably many other sources.
No.
Where is the connection and the linkage?
Changes in temperature will trigger or facilitate, make it easier for diseases to spread. There are some diseases that you may never find in very cold climates. For example, like malaria. Why? Because the mosquito can't survive in what? In a cold environment. But warm it up, then they start suffering from malaria. If the whites brothers start suffering from malaria, malaria will wipe them out because they may not necessarily have the resilience we have as Africans, who have had it for several years.
So with that well-elaborated preamble, you are not part of this conference that is ongoing, and you're a senior member when it comes to issues of global warming. Why?
Competing interests. One, and why do I say competing interests? I was scheduled to go to Egypt for the conference because I serve as the national focal point for a program called the Water Tracker, and we're supposed to be presenting our position as government of Uganda. The ministry nominated Water Governance Institute as the focal person for them on the matters of the Water Tracker. But we did not go because I had another meeting that was happening in Rwanda with the East African Legislative Assembly. So I put my efforts to that because I thought that I have greater influence here in East Africa than at the global level.
Well, now
the reason is that usually at many of those meetings, we tend to go as tourists, especially people from developing countries. We tend to go as tourists. And even if we might go with a script written from Uganda,
there's already a written script.
There is an internationally set script that they want to work on, that you have not been part of.
Let's now share the script, how significant this event is about, which began on the 6th up to 8th.
Yes.
Of what significance is it? Does it bring any change?
My script would, I'm happy with the decisions that have been taken, because for me the biggest decision that the Conference of Parties have made that has excited me is a decision to compensate, yes, for damage caused by the next environmental disasters will happen globally. Okay? To me, that is something positive. But I'm looking at it with one eye and suspecting it with another. Why? Because of the experience we have had in the Conference of Party conversations. In 2015, we set up targets. Countries set up targets, nationally determine the contributions and whatever, the NAPAs and the rest. But the amount of achievement that we have seen to compare to the level of hype, the amount of talk that is happening is nothing to go by. Because I see African countries like Africa is contributing less than 1% to the emissions globally.
That's too little.
Yes, and it's minuscule. It's not even something to talk about. But like because we're in the balloon, we must be interested in what is happening. China and the rest of the other countries, America and the rest, are emitting almost 98 something percent of the emissions. So the decision for them to say we are going to compensate for the damages that are going to happen, the environmental damages or climate-related disasters that are going to happen going forward from today, is a good thing. However, they need to demonstrate seriousness.
What demonstration are you
Because
talking about, Mr.
we have been talking about climate financing for some time now. But even how to access that climate finance, there are no clear mechanisms of how to access that climate finance. How does Uganda, for example, access that climate finance? The World Bank put up a facility which it wanted to use as a safeguard to fight against, to contribute to support countries that are being affected by climate disasters around, I think it was 2020 or around that time, of about $100 billion. But since that time, we have not seen, it was earlier, but it was supposed to be released in 2020. We have not seen how that money can be accessed. And we have now begun to see stories of climate fraud, climate finance fraud. So the question is, which is basically dominated in the Northern Hemisphere, in the developed countries. So the question is, what are those rules and procedures or guidelines that are in place that can make it, that one can follow to actually access that finance? And is that finance, apparently I don't see, I've not seen any mechanism or framework that one can follow for a country, for example, to access those climate finance. And is the process fast enough? If I applied in 2020, when do I receive the money? Do I receive the money in 2025? When do I receive the money? So that process of accessing the climate finance is not yet very clear. And what we are also seeing is that it tends to benefit the developed countries more than it benefiting the developing countries. And yet the developing countries are the ones that are being most affected by the changes in climate, because we are still depending on nature and we don't have the means to overcome some of the constraints of depending on nature. Europe has technology that they can use to cool the environment in your room.
Which Uganda we have not adopted. If you have to make a comparison between Africa, maybe Uganda as a case study,
Yes.
are we at the worst stage when it comes to matters of global warming?
No.
We're not at the worst
We
stage.
shouldn't. Actually, sometimes I say, I am glad I never attended, because I'm not one of those people who is causing serious emission. But I'm interested because what they are, let me use another word, what they are gassing out there in terms of like an exhaust fume, what they are gassing out in the developed countries is affecting me here.
So
That is the reason why I'm interested in what happens there.
do you think the Muntu is aware of such big discussions?
The Muntu can only understand climate change when the season, when the rainfalls don't come at the time they expect. If the rains were expected to come, say, around February, March, April, and then they delayed and came in April, May, June, then you know that June, July is a dry season. The guy who has been depending on the seasons to grow his crops will be disarrayed. He will not know, when do I plant, when don't I plant. Then of course the other thing is, with increasing temperature, like I said, the diseases in human beings and animals are becoming more prevalent.
You talked about the worst tragedy on earth is to live a life of uncertainty. And you talked about Uganda is uncertainty. Uncertain, especially when it comes to matters of global warming.
Yes.
What do we do then to address such uncertainties?
We need to change the way we do business. That's one. We need to change the way we produce food. And why am I saying this? We need to move away from depending on rainfall to produce our food. And for us here as Water Governance Institute, we are promoting one of the innovations of making sure that people can produce food without relying on rainfall. An innovation called aquaponics or hydroponics. And that is producing fish in a closed system, tanks and piping system, and use the same water to produce both fish and vegetables.
Maybe next time we have another.
That's an advert which you shouldn't charge me for. But the point I am raising that is that we must develop innovations like those innovations that can be used in space, like the guys who go to space, how they need to produce food. They need to produce food in closed systems. Use recycling of water. Okay? That is one approach. And for us, we are doing that. But there are many other approaches that one can use to produce food. I know that in Europe, they are now producing beef by taking a small tissue of beef and growing it in a petri dish. Okay? How that one is healthy and sustainable, I do not know. I am one of those people who still likes my rooster from the traditional method. I like the Muganda chicken. Yeah? I prefer it that way because I think that is organically grown than these other systems that we are having. So we need to find a balance of being able to utilize our resources that we have in a more efficient manner.
Okay. Would that be a parting shot idea?
My parting shot is that Uganda and us Ugandans should take charge of our narrative. Let's not wait for an external person to come and define our national narrative. For me, if we can begin to choose to make our own decisions rather than to be driven by a foreign agenda telling you jump and you're asking how high should I jump. No, we should determine how high, whether we want to jump or not.
I must confess to you that I thought that is a military language where they tell you jump, you don't ask why, you only ask how high I should
No, we are a civilian population. That's led in a democratic government, and therefore we should be espouse democracy in the decisions and practices that we actually espouse.
Mr. President, I must say I'm delighted. Thank you for being with us, especially on global and critical matters. My take home that is that if we are going to manage global matters in this country, it is not President Museveni's responsibility. It is not the ministers only. It is a collective responsibility. And this is the Coffee Court. My name is Fred Makuya.
Very interesting insight right there regarding global warming. And of course, like I said earlier, that it's a personal responsibility as an individual at whatever part you're located at to ensure that you take this responsibility not to participate in the emissions of carbons that's into the atmosphere. Simply because if we don't take the responsibility, definitely we shall frustrate the efforts by the responsible stakeholders, by the policymakers, which they are trying to make and ensure that the global warming is controlled in the country. At this particular time, let's get into a short commercial break. And of course, we shall be returning with the topic of discussion. Stick around. Good morning.